How is it possible that beings depicted over 5,000 years ago on Sumerian clay tablets possess features, technologies, and intentions so strikingly similar to the figures we now associate with aliens, modern deities, or even artificial superintelligences? What kind of ancestral memory survived for millennia, crossing empires and religions, until it emerged in the images, stories, and archetypes that still populate our collective imagination today? There's something deeply unsettling about the realization that the Sumerian gods, with their piercing eyes, strange garments, and almost godlike powers, didn't disappear over time. They simply changed their names, their clothes, and perhaps their purpose. This isn't merely an aesthetic coincidence or some superstition lost in the deserts of Mesopotamia. It's a clue, an ancient echo that continues to resonate, disguised in the art, beliefs, and symbols of our era. In this video, we'll explore a forgotten connection, an invisible thread linking humanity's most distant past with our most futuristic myths. What if this thread ultimately reveals that we have never been alone, neither in time nor in imagination? If this type of content fascinates you as much as it does us, supporting this channel with your subscription is one of the most important ways to help us continue uncovering stories that few dare to tell. More than 5 millennia ago, along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, humanity's first great civilization emerged, Sumer. While most societies were still wandering as nomadic tribes, the Sumerians had already built organized cities, mastered writing, created political systems, organized elaborate religious rituals, and observed the sky with a fascination that transcended mere contemplation. To them, the firmament wasn't just the home of stars, it was the dwelling place of the gods. But these gods weren't ethereal, invisible creatures. They were described in stunning detail, as if they possessed flesh, form, intentions, and technology. Sumerian records aren't legends passed down orally and distorted over time. They are inscriptions carved into clay tablets, preserved for millennia, containing names, genealogies, disputes, celestial maps, and even descriptions of flying vessels. Among these mysterious figures, the so-called Anunnaki stand out, literally meaning those who came to earth from heaven. They didn't descend from clouds or ride winged horses. They arrived in sky vehicles, possessed artifacts capable of controlling natural elements, and were portrayed wearing helmets, carrying cylindrical objects, and dressed in what resembled pressurized suits. We're not dealing with poetic metaphors here. We're confronted with symbols that, to many, sound like impossible anticipations of concepts that wouldn't emerge for thousands of years. But why do the gods of Sumer, a culture so ancient, so distant in time, bear such striking resemblance to images and concepts we still associate today with the unknown, the future, the supernatural? How can we explain that these same forms reappear in completely different cultures, at different times, with similar functions and meanings? Is this a coincidence repeated across centuries? Or are we dealing with something deeper? Perhaps a collective memory of contact lost in the mists of time? The modern fascination with higher entities, whether aliens, sentient machines, or messianic figures, often carries the same essence as Sumerian narratives. A presence from beyond, superior, that delivers knowledge, imposes hierarchies, manipulates nature, and transforms the course of civilization. This narrative structure hasn't disappeared, has simply evolved. And it's precisely in this symbolic, cultural, and perhaps even factual evolution that the great enigma of this video lies. The story we're about to tell isn't just about ancient gods. It's about how the myths of the past have shaped the icons of the present. It's about patterns that repeat themselves with frightening precision. It's about the hidden mirror between what we've been taught to call myth and what, deep down, may have been part of a forgotten reality. Behind every Sumerian name may lie a code, a suppressed history, or a warning that has traveled through millennia waiting to be deciphered. And it's at this point in our narrative that we'll dive into the heart of Sumer, between temples and stars, between tablets and theories. Because to understand why Sumerian gods resemble modern figures so closely, we need to return to the origin, to the place where myth, science, and memory intertwine. And there, perhaps, we'll find something that goes far beyond history. To understand why Sumerian gods evoke such resemblance to modern figures, we must first understand who the Sumerians were, not just as a people, but as a mindset, a lens through which the world was interpreted and reorganized. Emerging around 3500 BC, the Sumerians settled in southern Mesopotamia, a region now located in southern Iraq. They were the first to create truly organized city-states, such as Ur, Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, and Nippur. Each city had its own ruler, priests, armies, and, perhaps most importantly, its own patron god, as if each were a protective entity and director of that community. For the Sumerians, the gods weren't abstractions. They were real beings with specific desires, moods, jealousies, and agendas. They didn't inhabit some untouchable plane of perfection. They walked among humans, demanded offerings, decided wars, interfered with planting, and, according to many records, had their own hierarchies, families, and internal conflicts. This divine structure seemed almost like a mirror of human structures, or perhaps it was the other way around. The gods of Sumer were conceived based on something they saw, felt, or perhaps lived alongside. Humanity's earliest written narratives don't speak of morals, salvation, or sin. They speak of contact. They tell of beings who descended from heaven, of encounters with gods, who taught them to write, to farm, to build, to wage war. A striking example is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is not only one of the world's oldest stories but also presents us with a hero who is 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. A ratio curiously close to modern discussions of genetic hybridization and bioengineering. Gilgamesh interacts with gods, challenges celestial entities, and embarks on a journey that transcends the common understanding of his time. But behind this mythical epic lies a mentality that accepts contact with higher entities as a natural part of existence. What's most disturbing, however, is the richness of detail with which the Sumerians portrayed these beings. They had specific names, such as Enlil, Lord of the Winds, Enki, God of Waters and Wisdom, and Inanna, Goddess of Fertility and War. Beyond names, they were described with fixed visual symbols, often representing objects or tools that, to us, resemble technological devices. Enlil, for example, was often depicted with a kind of cylinder descending from the heavens, radiating light. Enki, his half-brother, was linked to genetic manipulation and humanity's creation from clay, a strange concept for a Bronze Age culture, yet disturbingly close to biological engineering. This is where the story takes on a deeper tone. These gods didn't just appear randomly. They had functions, well-defined roles within a celestial hierarchy the Sumerians called the assembly of the gods. The resemblance to a political or corporate structure is undeniable. Each entity had administrative responsibilities over portions of Earth, as if dividing zones of influence. They were, in essence, cosmic overseers, so meticulously organized that some scholars suggest this could have originated from something more literal than symbolic. Within this system emerged human figures who served as intermediaries. The priest kings. Men like Alulim of Eridu, considered the first king of Earth according to the Sumerian king list, weren't just political leaders. They were chosen or created by the gods themselves. This king list, a document mixing historical reigns with divine reigns lasting thousands of years, is one of archaeology's greatest enigmas. Some kings reigned for 28,800 years, others for 36,000. After the flood, another familiar theme that resonates strongly in Sumer, the reigns begin to appear more human. But the message is clear. There was a time when rulers weren't entirely human. They belonged to another order. In narrative terms, what the Sumerians are telling us is that there was a fall, a separation, a loss of contact. Something that many today interpret as the withdrawal of advanced beings, whether of divine, extraterrestrial, or interdimensional origin, leaving behind fragments, stories, and symbols. Among these fragments is the idea that humanity was created, modified, or guided by these beings. A dangerous concept if taken literally, but incredibly present not only in Mesopotamia but also in Egypt, Vedic India, and even Amerindian cultures. The pattern repeats itself. The enigma intensifies when we observe the artistic and iconographic details of Sumerian representations. In many bas-reliefs, these gods appear with wings, which for some symbolizes divinity, but for others suggests a literal allusion to aerial locomotion. Others carry bags, always the same shape, a kind of handle with a compartment, that appears not only in Sumer but also in Mayan, Aztec, and even Egyptian representations. What could this object be that different cultures insisted on portraying identically? A ritual utensil? A technological tool? A simple symbolic bag? The mystery remains. No less intriguing is the use of the 8-pointed star symbol, often associated with Inanna. This symbol, representing a connection to the heavens, was later adopted by several cultures, including modern religions. It appears as a symbol of power, revelation, and contact with the divine. Its persistence across millennia suggests not only reverence but memory, a memory that resists time, perhaps because it carries something that was never fully understood or completely forgotten. Meanwhile, scribes, key figures in Sumerian society, meticulously recorded these stories. This wasn't imaginative work but a sacred task, a duty to the gods. Sumerian texts weren't only religious but administrative, scientific, mathematical, and even medical. They knew astronomical cycles with remarkable accuracy, used sexagesimal numerical systems that influence our timekeeping today, and mastered concepts that wouldn't be rediscovered for thousands of years. Where did this early knowledge come from? How do we explain that a supposedly isolated culture was already describing planets invisible to the naked eye and celestial movements with such precision? Some mainstream scholars suggest much of this resulted from observations and accumulated oral knowledge across generations. Others, however, question how such advances could emerge so quickly in a context where material conditions remained extremely limited. The answer, for the Sumerians themselves, was simple. Knowledge was delivered by the gods. What we're seeing then is the outline of a narrative that transcends myth's boundaries, a story told by a civilization that saw itself as part of a larger plan, a cog in a much older cosmic system. The Sumerians didn't seek to please the gods, they sought to obey them. Their temples, called ziggurats, weren't just religious centers but contact points, towers erected to reach the heavens, as if maintaining open channels of communication with those who came from above. Were these temples attempts to re-establish a missing link? At this point, the mystery reaches its first apex. We're no longer discussing just an ancient culture with peculiar beliefs but a civilization that, from its very origin, saw itself as heir to an external legacy. A civilization that, for some reason, chose to accurately record what other cultures preferred to erase, reinterpret, or transform into legend. What if the Sumerians were right? What if what they recorded wasn't fantasy but memory? As we look back, we're not just examining the past. We're deciphering the distorted mirror of our own origin. A mirror where ancient gods may be the ancestors of modern myths or the precursors of something yet to come. As Sumerian civilization developed, something unsettling began emerging from their myths. A growing tension among the gods themselves. Sumerian cosmogony was neither static nor perfect. It was marked by internal disputes, betrayals, power shifts, and wars, not unlike those occurring among humans. Amid this divine entanglement, two central characters emerge whose rivalry shaped not only the gods' destinies but humanity's as well. Enlil and Enki. Enlil was the god of authority, control, and imposed order. He represented dominion over earth, the power to decide who lives and dies. Enki, conversely, was the god of waters, knowledge, and creativity. He was the one who, according to Sumerian tablets, intervened to protect humans, disobeying orders from above when he deemed it necessary. This conflict of perspectives, between Enlil's rigid control and Enki's almost subversive compassion, isn't just a mythological contest. It's a powerful metaphor for the clash between blind obedience and creative freedom, between hierarchy and consciousness. The climax of this tension occurs with the flood, an event described in terrifying detail on millennial tablets that predate the biblical Noah account by centuries. According to Sumerian records, Enlil decided to exterminate humanity, judging it had become too noisy, rebellious, and chaotic. But Enki secretly instructs a man named Ziusadra, or Utnapishtim in later versions, to build a vessel and save his family, animals, and seeds. The similarity to the Genesis narrative is so profound that even conservative scholars acknowledge the Sumerian version's precedence. But what does this story truly reveal? It's not merely divine punishment but a restart, a deliberate attempt to erase something that had spiraled out of control. A reset of humanity. If we interpret this not as myth but as cultural memory, we have a record of a catastrophic event, perhaps real, that nearly extinguished civilization, whether through natural causes, conflicts between higher entities, or mistakes made in humanity's creation process itself. This is where parallels with modern theories become unavoidable. Throughout the 20th century, several alternative theories began suggesting that Sumerian gods weren't just spiritual archetypes but visitors from other worlds. Researchers like Zechariah Sitchin, though controversial, popularized the idea that the Anunnaki were beings from another planet, perhaps from a system called Nibiru with an extremely elliptical orbit. According to this hypothesis, these beings came to Earth seeking resources, such as gold, and, to facilitate their mining operations, created a worker race, humans. This would explain why so many ancient cultures associate humanity's creation with mixing clay and divine breath. a possible symbol of genetic engineering. While many of these interpretations are rejected by traditional academia, they found resonance with a growing public eager for narratives challenging historical dogmas. Moreover, even within formal archaeology, unanswered questions remain. How could such an ancient civilization represent distant solar system planets with such accuracy? How did they describe Uranus and Neptune, only observed through telescopes centuries later? Where did their obsession with complex celestial cycles, requiring generations of precise observation, originate? None of this can be easily explained within conventional parameters. Perhaps most disturbing isn't what the Sumerians knew but what they left behind. Many of their symbols and ideas seem inherited by later civilizations like Babylon, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. From Inanna emerge Isis and Aphrodite. From Enki derives Ptah, the Egyptian god of creation by word. From Anu, the supreme Sumerian god, emerge Zeus and Jupiter. Even more intriguing, symbols like the caduceus, the staff with two intertwined serpents used in medicine today, already appeared in Mesopotamia as a symbol of knowledge and balance, exactly as we associate today with genetics, healing, and biological manipulation. Has this image been preserved for millennia because it contains more than symbolic meaning? Time passed, empires fell, but certain patterns persisted. As we enter the modern world, we see these same archetypes resurface in different formats. Ancient gods became superheroes, aliens, superior entities in science fiction works. The same themes reappear: beings descending from the sky, modifying humanity, imposing rules, then disappearing, leaving only myths and ruins as traces of their passage. Cinema, literature, and video games are filled with Sumerian echoes. It's as if, unconsciously, we're repeating the same stories, adapting them to our time, without realizing their roots run much deeper. What if this repetition isn't accidental? What if the collective unconscious described by Carl Jung operates as a living library of ancestral memory? Jung believed universal archetypes shaped human dreams, myths, and behaviors. Many of these archetypes align perfectly with Sumerian gods. The stern father Enlil, the compassionate creator, Enki, the sensual and destructive goddess, Inanna, the ancient celestial king, Anu. This not only explains their symbolic persistence but also their emotional resonance. When we look at these figures, something within us recognizes them. Something ancestral awakens. But there's another level of unease, one belonging to our present. We are, more than ever, on the verge of creating our own deities. Artificial intelligences processing billions of data points, machines capable of editing genes, surveillance systems knowing more about us than our own families. What once seemed like miracles or sorcery is now technology. If we project onto ancient gods' powers we're about to attain today, are we becoming what we feared or revered? In other words, are Sumerian gods similar to modern figures, or are we becoming godlike? The circularity of this idea is disturbing. What if myth isn't only memory of the past but also premonition of the future? What if the Anunnaki, whatever their nature, didn't just come but returned? Or worse, what if they never left? Among the most surprising details in Sumerian records is the description of a group known as the Igigi. According to texts, they were a kind of divine working class, subordinated to the Anunnaki, responsible for heavy labor, excavating, transporting, maintaining celestial bases. At one point, the Igigi rebel against their masters, refusing to continue as servants. The Anunnaki's response? Create a new species from Earth's clay, modified with divine essence, humans. The parallel with modern ideas of an automated workforce that might rebel, like conscious machines in science fiction, is striking. Are we repeating, in our era, the same mistakes of mythological antiquity? The mysteries don't end there. Real and documented curiosities continue challenging our understanding of the past. In the British Museum sits a clay tablet describing a celestial object's movement with such precision it would only make sense with telescopic use. At UR, excavations revealed structures with drainage systems so advanced they rival Roman engineering. The city of Eridu, considered the world's first city, shows an urban pattern suggesting centralized planning with astronomically aligned axes. This was at a time when, supposedly, humanity was still learning to live in groups. Perhaps the most perplexing question isn't, why do Sumerian gods resemble modern figures? But rather, why do modern figures insist on repeating Sumerian gods? Why, even with access to knowledge, science, and reason, do we continue imagining, creating, and representing entities so similar to those emerging from Mesopotamian deserts over 5,000 years ago? The answer may not lie in history books but in the deep layers of human psyche, in genetic memories, in symbolic codes crossing generations. Perhaps humanity is trapped in a cycle of forgetting and rediscovery, a cycle where civilizations rise, receive knowledge, attempt to control it, abuse it, and get reset. If true, then the Sumerians weren't first. They were just the first to leave a record. And their gods, myths, and fears still walk among us, disguised as fiction, hidden in technology, whispering through time. Amid Sumer's silent ruins, among tablet fragments and columns defying time, a question echoes that has endured centuries. What did we truly see, and what did we choose to forget? The divine figures emerging from Mesopotamian sands may never have ceased existing. They simply changed their masks. If yesterday they were gods with flaming eyes, today they are digital entities, artificial consciousnesses, intelligences beyond human comprehension. The symbol remains. The name changes. We live in an era of rediscovery. By excavating the past's archives, we seek not only to understand the ancients but to find ourselves. It's unsettling to realize that the more we advance technologically, the closer we come to narratives that seem to belong only to myth. Laboratory creation of life, genetic manipulation, domination of complex systems. All this has been told for millennia in forgotten language, in legendary form. Or were they warnings? What the Sumerians knew, or remembered, may have been a fragment of a much larger story involving not only humanity's origin but its purpose, limits, and cycles. Perhaps, by repeating their myths between modernity's lines, we're unconsciously asking to remember. Because there's something in Sumerian god figures that doesn't die, that insists, that returns. And maybe, just maybe, they were never merely symbols of what we believed. Perhaps they were reflections of what we can still become.